Joel Klatt of Fox Sports, who's going to stop by for 2 nights on NFL Network's draft coverage, starting 1 week from tonight in Kansas City, right here on the Rich Eisen Show. The headline of the first round of the draft will be what, in your estimation?
I have this suspicion that we're going to get 3 quarterbacks taken in the first 3 picks.
Okay.
I get the sense that, the talk about Stroud not going to Houston is smoke, and that it's fake. Even if it's just barely out there. And once those 2 guys, Bryce Young, I think going first, and then CJ goes, I just think that there's going to be a bit of a panic from the teams that need quarterbacks. And they're going to be looking at Indianapolis at 4 and saying to themselves, we've got to jump them. Mm-hmm. So whether it's Indy going up 1 spot or someone jumping in there at that 3 spot with Arizona, I think someone's going up to get Anthony Richardson. And I think that's going to be the headline of night 1.
Richardson is the guy.
That's
what
right.
You're saying.
That's right.
What makes you think that?
His upside is just is so high. I'm going to give you some of my stuff, so you're going to have to hear this twice.
You know what? I'll act like, oh, my gosh, that's so fascinating. Or, you know me, I'll say, I've heard that on the Rich Eisen Show
that's
before.
Right.
You know me. I don't mind self-promoting, but have at it.
Okay, so quarterbacks in the draft in some way are like Rubik's Cubes. And you've got to figure out 2 things about the Rubik's Cube. How good is it once it's figured out? Right. So once it's unlocked, what is the potential? What's the ceiling? You can throw out all the cliches. And then the other part, though, and this is the more difficult part, is how many turns of the Rubik's Cube is it going to take for it to become finished or close to finish?
Yes, sir.
Everybody would like a Rubik's Cube that has a high ceiling. Here's the interesting part. I also believe everybody wants an unfinished Rubik's Cube. So that you can't just say like, well, this is what he is and he's got no upside. So you're just drafting a known commodity and he's never going to get better than that. You want the ability to develop a little bit, project a little bit, but not too much. There's this perfect sweet spot. So what is it, Rich? 8 turns, 9 turns, 20 turns of the cube to get it finished or polished or ready or reach its potential. Anthony Richardson, if figured out, becomes the best player on the field in maybe any matchup. That's his upside. Now, how far away is he from that? Quite far. So you've got to think to yourself, am I smart enough to figure out 25 moves of a Rubik's Cube and get this guy to a point where he can be one of the best players in the NFL? It's this equation, it's this dance that the decision makers have to go on. And the reason that I like him at 3 right behind those guys is that his upside is so much higher than someone like, let's say, Will Levis, but he's going to go behind them because he's too many turns behind in terms of the Rubik's Cube. Richardson is a phenomenal player. The one thing I would say that is somewhat of a knock is that he's not consistently good. He's occasionally great, but he's not consistently good.
How much of that had to do with where he was, the program in Florida? Because, again, that's the conversation about Richardson is the wins and losses in this past year.
Of course.
And, of course, he's in the same conference as Will Levis.
That's right.
Same conference as Bryce Young. Same conference as Hendon Hooker. And he was in 4th in that conversation, win-loss wise. Much.
The talent can supersede some of those questions. I will say, though, there were moments when you could tell the team was on his back and he was raising the level of all the boats. He was the tide. Bryce Young is constantly the tide. Everybody around him has to get better. He's going to pull you down the field, score in big moments. We've seen those moments with Richardson. We've seen those moments with C.J. Stroud. And for me, it's the mundane. Can you be really good with the mundane? I make this comment as well quite a bit. I think most throws for a quarterback, even at the NFL level, are on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of difficulties, 4s and 5s. There's you live in 4s and 5s, maybe some 6s, right? They're just not ultra difficult throws. Now, you got to process information, you got to be on time, and you got to do those sort of things. You've got to be exceptional at 4s, 5s, and 6s. You cannot miss them. You can't miss them.
Right.
He misses those throws sometimes. The difference is he can go to 9 and 10 where other guys can't.
Also with his legs and things of that nature.
That's
right. And I do like your Rubik's Cube analogy very much.
I love it. See, this was like a tester, guys.
Yeah, no. You can workshop your stuff on the Rich Eisen Show and with me anytime. Text me, call me, or show up here. But let me just add on to that. Is that part of solving a Rubik's Cube is whose hands is the cube in?
That's right.
Because you've seen the videos, right? Like if you hand me a Rubik's Cube, it will take me 15 years to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Okay, but you've seen the videos. You can hand the Rubik's Cube to somebody from one of the four corners of the earth. They flip it 3 times and it's done.
Yeah.
So give me the hands in whose Rubik's Cube named Anthony Richardson would be placed, who can figure it out. You're saying somebody's going to trade up to 3. Give me the team who you think they trade up to 3 with the new coach that they have, or the coach they already have, or the program they already have, the weapons they already have. Whose hands do you think Richardson's cube would be best placed?
I think that's 2 different answers.
Okay.
I think that the team that I do think the team that trades up is Indianapolis. I think they move up 1 spot. It's too easy. It's too clean. And Arizona would rather do that with Indianapolis, and the reason is because they can still sit there and get Will Anderson.
It would be the first overall pick in the draft.
That's right.
For anybody that doesn't, want a quarterback.
And they'll pick something up, and it won't be too much. It won't be too much to give up for Indianapolis, and it won't be too much to slide down for Arizona. Right. So I think that makes too much sense. Now, do I think that that's the best place for him? I'm not totally sure. I will say this, though. In the last 4 and 5 years, I've been pretty opinionated about quarterbacks.
Yes, you have.
And I will tell you, in the last 4 or 5 years, I've had to totally rethink and self-assess some of that, because I'm like, hold on, projects are working more now than they ever have in the NFL. It used to be in what let's call it old school football. Without the modern style of RPOs and college style offenses kind of infiltrating the National Football League, projects didn't work. They just didn't. Now they do. We forget Patrick Mahomes was a project. I remember the eyebrows raising when Andy Reid
we thought it was Deshaun Watson on our set in Philadelphia. That was the draft hall on the Rocky Steps, and Andy Reid's trading up, and in Philadelphia, it's clearly for Deshaun Watson. That's what we all thought on the set, from Mayock to DJ to CD you referred to, Charles Davis earlier. And it was Mahomes. And we're
Mahomes.
Okay.
And it was a project. Remember, he retreated in the pocket. No one had success out of that offense. Could it work? We don't know. He seems like too much of a gunslinger.
Yeah.
What I found out about Andy Reid and anybody that had ever touched Brett Favre is that that's what they saw in Patrick Mahomes early in his career. So he was a project. Jalen Hurts was a project coming out of Oklahoma.
Yeah, now he's the highest.
Now he's the highest paid player.
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson, same. Josh Allen, same. I mean, all of these guys had question marks, big question marks about what they were going to be at the next level, and they have worked out. And so I think there are teams and decision makers that are going to be much more aggressive in terms of the, quote, project than they have been in the past.
Joel Klatt here from Fox Sports NFL Network. First night and second night of draft coverage featuring Joel Klatt along with me and Daniel Jeremiah and Charles Davis, currently right here on the Rich Eisen Show. So which player that you saw the most is the best in this draft? Do you think?
I think that the best, I saw a lot of them.
I know.
I think the best overall player I saw in person was Will Anderson. Now, the best offensive player, non-quarterback that I saw was Bijan Robinson. And the best quarterback I saw was Bryce Young. I saw them all. Yep. I saw all of these guys. Saw Tyree Wilson in person. Saw Jackson Smith-Njigba in his really good year. Here's what I'll say about Jackson Smith-Njigba. It'd be easy for me to give you him as an answer. We forget he was on the same team as Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. And both of those guys, as well as their coach, who's a great coach, Brian Hartline, the wide receiver coach at Ohio State, to a man, told me in person several times, best players Jackson Smith-Njigba on this team. That's with Garrett Wilson on the team. You saw what he just did. You saw what Chris Olave just did in their rookie seasons. Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to lead the league in receptions one of these next few years. And we're all like, well, he missed a year. I don't care. So did Micah Parsons. So did Penei Sewell. So there you go. I gave you like 5 guys there.
And that totally makes sense. And it's kind of funny because now with, Smith and Jigba, who's coming up in the third hour, with him being there and the rest of the very talented receiving group at The Ohio State for C.J. Stroud, I'm hearing you say Marvin Harrison's the Jr. is going to be the best player in the NFL in a couple of years anyway.
That's absolutely true.
And by the way, that's who everyone was talking about after Stroud's pro day, was that kid.
I agree.
He was there catching passes at that pro day.
He is the best college wide receiver I've ever covered.
Really?
Yes. Now, I never saw Randy Moss in person at Marshall, right?
Yes.
Or any of those things. Marvin is so special. You know what's also interesting about this draft? It's a decent draft, right? I think we would all. It's a decent draft.
Yes,
we got quarterbacks, good edge rushers,
mystery, which is what I love as well.
Good mystery,
big time.
Corners, a lot of good corners, which I like, and yet we've got several positions that if there were college players who are not eligible for this draft, if they were eligible for this draft, they would be the best players at their position. I've got 4 guys that I could tell you right now that I think would get picked in this year's top 7.
Well, Caleb Williams is obviously one.
Caleb Williams, Drake May from North Carolina, the quarterback, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Brock Bowers at Georgia.
That guy is insane, Brock Bowers at Georgia.
Think about that. We got 4 players going back to college football that would be NFL starters next year at their respective positions.
And then another thing I love about this draft as well, Joel, you mentioned his name already, is Bijan Robinson's out there too. And supposedly running backs are not supposed to be taken high. And we will be talking about, no doubt, in our draft coverage, is that the defending world champs, whose town we will be in, and they won the Super Bowl with a 7th-round pick leading their rushing attack, and he scored in the Super Bowl out of Rutgers, Isaiah Pacheco, and yet this kid, Bijan Robinson, is really, really talented and can change the fortune of an NFL team just by him being picked.
I keep looking at Philly in this draft, and I'm like, why wouldn't you go get a guy on a first contract?
Because they're all about blocking,
which I get,
and tackling on that line, not running through it. That's what they're about, because they can run through it with Miles Sanders, and all you got to do is put Boston Scott against the Giants, and he'll score 5 touchdowns. So
I think Bijan is the best non-quarterback offensive player in the draft. I think that if
does that include linemen too? You would throw that on linemen? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's so versatile. He's a lot like Christian McCaffrey. Now, he's not going to get that comparison a lot, but he is really good inside the tackles, good vision, jump cut, lateral movement, really good outside of the tackles. He has home run ability. We've seen him make guys miss, have top end speed, but he also catches it really well, both out of the backfield and lined up in the slot. He can move around. He's a smart player. Texas really struggled on the offensive line, and yet he still produced, never complained about it. Great teammate, hard worker. At some point, when we see, let's take the Cowboys, for example.
Oh, boy. Let's.
I'm not saying that they're going to take Bijan, but when was Dak Prescott his best? When Zeke was the best running back in football.
Okay.
Zeke was the best running back in football in part because he was on his first contract, which means you can spread resources around to things like the offensive line. Okay. When are we going to start talking about the advantageous nature of the 5th year of control for running backs as well as quarterbacks, like we always do? Inevitably, at the end of the first round, what are we going to talk about if Will Levis is still on the board? Well, you're going to want that 5th year of control. And first round versus second round.
Hendon Hooker will be having that conversation a week from tonight, too.
Exactly. So when does that start with running backs? Because it's pretty clear to me, you look around the league and these top-end running backs, everyone's hesitant to get them to their second contract. When are we going to start talking about getting dynamic offensive threats with a 5th year of control?
And the running back position, it's tough to think that that's going to be the position that would lead that charge. Maybe I don't know, because the receiving group usually is deep in a draft, one would think, although you're hearing that this year's not as much as previous years. Although somebody like Jalen Hyatt jumps out at me, Zay Flowers. These are the names of guys who can, went viral over the past 24 hours that Mahomes was throwing past to Zay Flowers. And here come the Chiefs getting another one.
Also, Quentin Johnston was with him at one point.
Exactly. That's another one, although I don't need to hear his name very much. He ruined a certain particular bowl game for me.
Well, the replay officials ruined it.
I like that answer, Joe. Good answer, as we say on Family Feud.
Geez.
Good answer. I appreciate that. But yes, because the running back position, and again, I'm happy to have this conversation if there's time a week from tonight or the Friday night of the draft as well. I mean, how in the world is Austin Eckler, who the only person who scored more touchdowns over the last couple of seasons than him is nobody, and Jalen Hurts is the only one who scored more touchdowns than him last year, and so he's trying to get a new contract out of the Chargers, and they're saying no, you can go look for somebody else to go, play for if you can find that team. I just don't know. And again, Isaiah Pacheco scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl. So did Sky Moore, and they weren't even remotely close to the first round of the draft. And it'll
be interesting.
Joel Klatt is here on the show. I don't know how much NBA playoffs you're tuned into. It could be 0.0, whatever.
I mean, if it's not film, getting ready for next week.
Totally get it. But, for me hosting this show, I'm locked in on that too.
I get it.
7 NBA playoff games this past weekend, one more to go. And I'm like, really? All right, I'll do it. It's Denver. It's Denver versus Minnesota. Then the game comes on. And the voice I heard calling it was Gus Johnson.
Oh, it doesn't sound good.
I just took the remote and put it down.
Good for you. I love Gus.
The thing that was, I guess is how, one would say, Chris, is this wrong to say this, how poorly the Timberwolves are playing? Is that the Gus Johnson game didn't come down to the last shot?
Didn't even come down to it.
I mean, that's how.
Not even Gus.
He couldn't help it.
He couldn't even. That's.
Do you ever look at Gus sometimes and just go, it's you, right? It's him. Is it him with these games?
I hope for it every single week, because I will be honest, like when we get a dud, I feel so bad for him.
It ruins his brand.
I'm just like, man, like this sucks for you. I'm so sorry. It's like I'm disappointing him on the field,
Oh my gosh.
He is
electric. Right?
He's electric, and you know what? I'd love to say something else too, because yes, he's electric, and the calls are amazing. I will say this, that because he's so good in that regard, I don't think he gets enough credit for how technically sound he is at what he does.
Agreed.
His timing is impeccable. He's got great editorial sense. He'll call me off of things, and I'm like, boy, that was really smart. And because he just understands it.
Hold on one second in that respect, because that's phenomenal, fascinating. Joe Klatt is here on the Rich Eisen Show. We were just explaining on the Roku channel stream about Gus Johnson, his partner on Fox Sports. Certainly the big game on Saturday. His brilliance. What do you mean he calls you off of stuff? What do you mean by that?
I get so enthralled and deep into the football and the matchup and so I can think to myself, like, I can't wait to talk about this like nose guard matchup, and that's where the run game is. And he'd be like, hey, youngster, and he kind of like rubs his head, like this, and he's like, hey, young buck, we got to make stars. He's like, guards aren't stars. We're talking about Will Johnson, the corner. We're talking about, the quarterbacks. Yes, and he's right. He's right in that sense.
Young buck.
Yeah, he does. But he's phenomenal. He's taught me so much about this industry. We talk a lot about rhythm. I think one of the reasons why we've worked so well is that he taught me that doing a game is equal parts two things. One, listening. And 2, double dutch. He's like, don't trip the rope. There's 2 going. There's 2 going, and he's always just said, he's like, don't trip the rope. He's like, slide in, get going, and then get out. And I think that's what makes the rhythm of our game good. Like I really do. Is there's that sense. He's unbelievable. For as much as all of you love Gus Johnson,
Yeah.
I love him even more.
Well, I mean, because we got to have him here in studio. When was that? Right before Michigan Ohio State. Yeah, we sent him to the airport. I think he was going to Columbus right after that, and he hung with us for like an hour, and he was awesome.
Yeah, he's great.
As soon as he walked on the set, and then I love that phrase. That works for us here too. Don't trip the rope. Honestly, because that's what we do. We're here every day. We're chopping it up every day.
Yeah, you gotta get in there, get going. You gotta do it, and then jump out. There are times though.
Yes.
When I look over and he's just looking at me, and I'm like, I just tripped the rope. I got it.
You don't want to let him down.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
My bad.
Joel Klatt here on the Rich Eisen Show.
He's phenomenal.
Let's again, the puzzle pieces for the draft also includes what's going on in the NFL.
Yep.
So we'll have the Lamar Jackson
saga
kind of hanging over it, because you can't sign someone like, let's just say a team just dared to sign him to an offer sheet or decided to finally do that. The Ravens have 5 days to match. So unless somebody signs him to an offer sheet Sunday, those first round picks are finished for this year. So that's not going to really happen in the middle of the first round. The Rodgers, Jets, Packers stuff absolutely can happen on Thursday night or even Friday night.
Yeah.
I mean, when we were in, we had the Josh Rosen trade happen in the middle of the second round one year after the Kyler Murray choice. Yep. That happened one year. But all things can happen. So another aspect as well, because if I'm not mistaken, the Giants ended up having, I believe it was Will Levis and Hendon Hooker in. They've had quarterbacks in.
They have, which makes after the contract they gave out
to Daniel Jones. Well, I'll never forget the day after he was drafted. It was in Nashville. You were kind enough to come on this show.
Yeah.
And you said that it was a huge reach and it would set the Giants franchise back significantly. And you were right till Brian Daboll showed up. I mean, you'd have to say that.
Yeah.
You can't sit here and say that the Jones pick was working out until they just decided to finally hire the right guy who can figure out his Rubik's Cube, if you don't mind.
There you go. I love
bring it all full circle.
I love it. Bring it full circle.
So what'd you think of the Jones contract, Joel?
I didn't love it.
Double down.
I didn't love it. I don't know.
Keep going.
Why is it I want the Giants. I want to be like, hey, the Giants did a great job.
It's not personal.
I don't love the contract. I don't think that the players in that locker room look at Daniel Jones and be like, yep, that's the guy who needs to get that type of money. I think it was too high. Did they have to pay him that? Maybe. Why is Saquon taking the position that he's taking? Because he's more important to them. In some regard, I know quarterbacks are generally more important, but I think that there are a lot of Daniel Joneses in the NFL, and there's not a lot of Saquon Barkleys. And I think in a locker room, you can't fake it. Everybody knows acutely who's the most important, who's the one carrying the team. Who are the alphas, and if the contracts don't align like that, you can. There can be issues in the locker room. I hope that that's not the case with the Giants. I don't sense that that's going to all of a sudden turn into. I mean, I know Joe Burrow is going to get more than that, but he got a lot. That contract was not small.
No, it's $40 million a year, and obviously you saw what Hurts just got, $51 million a year. It's slotted, one would think, but it's still way up there. And the fact that
maybe we won't think that this is as high as it is right now when we get the Burrow deal, and we start getting these other deals out there.
Right. So last one for you. The news that Ian Rappaport put out there that Will Levis stopped by New England had Will Levis in. I mean, again, that's another piece of the puzzle going into the draft. I mean, what's that all about?
First of all, the best part about the Patriots is that you never know if they're doing things just so that tweet will go out. It's almost
What do you think of that? Where you're sending a message?
Yeah, you're just kind of like, we're just going to throw it out there. So everyone's like, wait, did we miss something?
There's also the Belichick aspect of, and I've heard he's done this over and over and over again, is you get the kid in because you never know if he could wind up playing you in a key week, and you already know on the grease board what bothers him, because you've asked him.
Play him, or if you're going to get him later, this is the time to be in a position of, you don't get to bring in a free agent and be like, get on the board.
Yeah, right.
So this is the time when you have kind of the authority over the meeting where you can test them. From here on out, now you're just trying to sell them on coming. If you're in a free agent or if you're playing them, now you kind of understand those things that maybe give him trouble. So this is not new for Belichick. Levis is an interesting piece. He's a talented guy. He turns the ball over too much, but man, he makes a lot of big throws. I would say the one knock on Levis that I have, other than the turnovers, is those other three quarterbacks at the top, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and Anthony Richardson. There are moments when you can tell that he is elevating the entire team to a place where maybe they shouldn't go and competing for and maybe winning a game. Levis doesn't have many of those. He played pretty well in 2021 against Tennessee, but there aren't those moments where I'm just like, man, Levis is dragging Kentucky across the finish line, and you see that with the other three guys.
Man, if we're sitting in Kansas City a week from tonight, Joel Klatt, which we will, but if we're sitting there and Levis is still on the clock at 14 and the time's ticking down, we'll be talking about this tweet.
This visit.
Yeah.
I think he'll be available.
At 14. What about Bijan Robinson at 14? Will he be available then? It's entirely possible.
Maybe.
Could you
that's the sweet spot. I think Bijan is like the 10 to 16 range.
So the Patriots are on the clock, and they have a choice between the two of them. And Chris, whichever small school you've never heard of that's got an offensive guard, that's who they'll choose instead of the two of them and send you up a wall.
2.0.
Yeah, Cole Strange 2.0.
Cody Mock
drive you up a wall
right there and match him with Ramondre. What are we doing?
Or Will Levis if you don't think Mac Jones
What
is
did you like Cody Mock, North Dakota State?
There you go.
Offensive line.
Write it down.
He's guaranteed to be the Patriots pick.
He could take his teeth out. It'll be great.
Does he not have teeth?
He grew up on a farm, 5,000 acres. He's like through and through.
He had the teeth knocked out. He hasn't even had them replaced, right? He can have a ton of clam chowder through a straw. It's perfect.
Jeez.
Just for you. Fantastic. Joel, thank you for coming on, sir.
You bet.
Greatly appreciate it.
I appreciate
Joel
you having
Klatt
me.
right here, absolutely. Jackson Smith and Jigba, by the way, coming up in our
best receiver
3.
in the draft.
I will tell him that. Right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Joe Carter is still to come on this program. Don't you dare go anywhere. Got about another minute and a half left here on the Roku channel. So what do you know what's pretty amazing, again, I got 90 seconds. Harbaugh, my guy, has kicked the tires on the NFL 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
And they had a better year last year. I know how it wound up. And the recruiting class seems to keep on chugging along.
I know it's early, but this is his best team.
I keep hearing that.
Back.
Bruce Feldman told us the same thing.
Yep, it is. It's his best team he's ever had. He's got all the pieces. He's got Ohio State trying to break in a new quarterback.
Coming to the big house.
He's got Penn State trying to break in a new quarterback.
Oh,
he's got Georgia trying to break in a new quarterback.
Oh,
he's got
next
Alabama.
Level. Look at
trying
you
to
going
break
outside
in
the conference.
A new quarterback.
Are you saying this is the path to the basket, the ultimate basket? Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying.
Okay.
I think Michigan's going to be really good. And I think Harbaugh kicking the tires on the NFL had more to do with his relationships up in Ann Arbor than it did his desire to go to the NFL.
Did those get fixed?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so.
Well, we'll see next year after the
we
season.
will see next year. I can't wait to see them. Blake Corum coming back and some of those pieces.
Yeah.
Will Johnson's going to be a top corner in the draft in a couple of years.
Okay.
All right. I think Michigan's going to be, and people at Ohio State hate this, Michigan's going to be my pick to win the Big Ten.
Attaboy. Joel Klatt, everybody. Round of applause for Joel.
Well done.
Louder!
Well done.
See you in Kansas City, Joel.
See you, bud.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.